Night. Good to see you. Well, I don't actually see you, but hopefully you're out there. I was running a little bit late tonight and really had to think through how do I begin. How do I begin to talk about this week? But I do have some tools. In fact, that's what I do. I'm used to crisis. I'm used to dealing with people who struggle with anger. I'm used to people who struggle with sorrow, with lots of issues. I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't claim anything other than I'm a human being, and I try to help people, and hopefully you find that helpful. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the problem, but I want to spend most of the time on the solution. But I think on everybody's mind, at least in America, is the difficult, it's just a horrible tragedy of George Floyd and what went down there. This isn't new. It's been going on for some time, and I think we just need to address it. We need to deal with it. So there were protests, which is a great idea. I also believe in voting, that we've got to somehow solve this problem. On top of it, it seems to be there's other problems with looting, rioting, just bad stuff, violence. And I will say that accurate media would just divide the two up. But somehow I'm seeing lots of words saying protesters are getting this, and it's like, I think it's protesting something is really valid. I think, though, just going in and stealing and scaring people isn't. I think a lot of us are scared. We now have another fear. We've had the original fear of the coronavirus, what we didn't know. Then we had the fear of some people felt the government was overstepping boundaries, so we had that fear. Last week I was focusing on the fear of what is it like to be so afraid you don't want to, because everybody's kind of shelter in place. It's like walking on eggshells, and I didn't want to offend friends, so we don't share. Well, now it's a little bit like a powder keg, like we're really afraid to walk, to tread, to do the things that would disturb our neighbors. If we assume everybody is doing the best they know to do, it doesn't mean that it's the best choice, but it's an interesting philosophy to say that I'm doing the best I know to do. The people that are doing violent, horrible things are doing the best they knew to do. Even those of us that are afraid or say something too tough on social media, or we don't say enough. Like, if we assume everybody's just trying their best, that we're not really intending to do harm, but it comes out that way. The people that so how do we get out of this? I think if we be gentle. This is a time to be gentle. This is a time for a timeout. That sounds funny, but I was thinking, what would a teacher do? We would get a timeout. We just need to take a break. We need to be quiet, kind of put our heads down on the desk, let everybody calm down, maybe even the teacher. I think we need a break before it just continues on. And I'll speak from my life. If I watch some of the things on YouTube and see things, it's so disturbing that it makes my blood boil. Then now I'm walking around with boiling blood, and then someone says something to me, or, it's displaced anger on my part. And thankfully, I'm not like over the top. It's actually better than it has been. I think when crises like this happen, I know to be even extra conscientious to not let things get out of hand. But that's what we need to do. We need to be mindful of that. Sorry, there's a little tiny gnat that is attracted to me right now. Probably there to humble me. There, and in fact, let's talk about that. thinking mean thoughts, thinking fearful thoughts. If you're interested in ancient Christianity, they had a term for it. It was called logismoi. These are assaultive thoughts. And it's even from a psychological point of view, it's a novel idea to consider that our thoughts might actually be on the outside of us. That they're not my thoughts, they're invitations to disturb my inner peace. And why did the gnat? Well, we're supposed to ignore them. We're supposed to just shoo them away, to let it go in one ear and out the other, not the gnat, but just to shoo it away. They're always going to be there. There it is again. So, I heard someone like 2 months ago, a holy person who I trust, and I might put a link down there. I think he would be, I want to respect his humility, but he said something I thought was really profound. And now I see it even more. He said that, we're now in shelter in place. When you're alone with your own thoughts, what is going to come up? Your own soul sicknesses, or we could call them passions. If you have a few things that you don't get, like back then it was toilet paper, you might not get the type of food you wanted, you might not get to leave your home. Little by little, it's going to build up. And he says, be very, very, very careful. These were his words, be very careful, because anger, there could be so much anger inside that it could begin to come out. And now I'm seeing that. I think we have a lot of fearful people, but I think it's more anger, that we're getting angry about anything. Like, I can't say what I want to say on social media because I'm afraid I'll be judged. And these are logismoi as well. These are assaulted thoughts that I'm now judging the people that even haven't judged me, but I'm already assuming they may misjudge me. You see, that's the craziness of this. That when you're unified, when you're close to each other, when you know each other's heart, you don't have to preface everything. But when there's this kind of conflict, we're afraid to open our mouths to say anything. But yet, on the other hand, we feel like we need to. We need to give our support for what's right, and we need to denounce what's wrong, but we have to do it in a manner that doesn't seem to fan the flames. Wow, it does. There is a verse in the Bible that does say a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up dissension. And we have harsh words, and that may be stirring up dissension. We may be hearing some people use soft words, and hopefully it would help calm things down. This experience really made me think about the value of how good it is to be able to de-escalate things. I'm used to it. I'm used to de-escalating. It's not my job to make a family or a couple, make them calm down. That's not how that works. I don't think dominance is the right approach. When people come here, usually it's a safe setting for them to be able to listen to each other, to talk, to have a safe place, peaceful, where everybody takes turns talking. If they were to just fight, they could do that at home. But when they're coming here, this is the safe place. And often, my hope is that if they just take what they do here home, they can do this the rest of their life. We need safe places to be able to talk and to be with each other. And it would be great if we could disagree and still feel safe with each other. That we could just listen more and talk less. I'm talking a monologue tonight, but I think listening is good. In my meditative practice, I had some challenging things. I worked with a group of people where I'm afraid that anything I say will escalate this. And I don't feel like I want to control the outcome. In the past, I would have wanted to control the outcome. But I feel like I want to say the right thing, but I was overthinking it to the point where I'd written the email 5 times and didn't send any of them. I think this also is a time, believe it or not, for us to speak what's on our conscience. That if we're too silent about things, that's no good either. I don't think we need to shout. Shouting is interesting. One time it was a counseling session, and it dawned on me, when we shout, like if I'm in a grassy field and I see a family member and they're far away, I'm going to shout, hey, 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 can you get, come here. So why would I shout? Because I don't feel like they can hear me. And I had this epiphany that when we shout and we're just like 6 feet from each other, social distancing there, why am I shouting? Because I don't feel heard. It's an interesting idea that if we feel heard, we don't need to shout. I think there's some animation and our passions get the better of us. What is the best way? We have our friend. What is the best way to... It's good to read glasses. So what is the best way to shoo away those negative assaultive thoughts if you try to ignore them and they keep coming back? Is there anything we can do? Great question. Thank you. First of all, it's a spiritual practice. And I say this humbly. There are better people than me to talk about this, and there's good writings on this. It's logismoi, Logismoi. You can Google it, but I'll speak from my experience. I will say, and another thing came to my mind. I heard a holy man, and he was a psychologist and a monk. He did a seminar called From Thinking to Prayer, and it was quite good. And my website that hosts it is not so up and running, so I'll try to figure out a way to get that to people. It's good. He talks about these assaultive thoughts, saying they're like puppy dogs. If you, and I think puppies are cuter and more fun, but he says that you almost have to kind of, come on, go this way, come on, go this way. Instead of, if you try to directly, and I don't know puppy dogs, but he said they'll turn on you and viciously attack you. There are people that suggest, I might as well say saints, that suggest that ignoring them is the key. Ignore, 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 and ignore, and ignore. Now, from a neurological point of view, the more you ignore them, the less likely you are to grow brain cells around them. And this is hard to do, but I work a lot with this because people need coaching. Nope, you're doing the right thing. Nope, keep on doing this, keep on ignoring. You're fine, you're fine, you're fine. What happens is after about 5 weeks, it takes 5 weeks for a brain cell to grow. And we can reroute them, and you start to get relief. Now that's from the brain cell part. The outsider self part, where the assaultive thoughts are coming at us. Almost everybody that I've read says to ignore them. There are a few that suggest that you think neutral thoughts, like you would count candles if you're in church, or you would count things, or do something, change the subject. I do believe in ignoring to not let them affect you. There was a saintly person who said that if you're shaking with fear, and say like your faith tradition involves a prayer rope, and you're praying, that shows the enemy that you're frightened, and there's something valuable to not be frightened. And my heart goes out to people that are frightened, because I've been frightened myself. But there is some value to not acting frightened and transforming it into anger. And this is psychological. Like, you know what? No, I'm not going to be frightened here. I'm a believer in God. God only has good things for me. Even if I fall apart at the seams, even if I pass out, and let myself pass out. See, the enemy tricks us into such horrible, wicked thoughts, like we're all going to die in the end. That's kind of how it is. And if we're not prone to fear, by the way, then it's going to lead us down the path of, hey, that's attractive. Wow, don't you want to partake of that, whatever that is? So it leads towards pleasure. But if that's not our weakness so much, it's going to go down the path of fear, scaring us. And so I heard someone say, and this person was pretty cool, she said that we don't want to do things that disturb our inner peace. And that's where I think the media is part of that. If you're quieting yourself down through meditation and prayer, you're going to have more of them. It's just how it is. If you are so busy on the internet, you're playing video games 10 hours a day, you're eating, drinking, and being merry, you probably won't be assaulted by these thoughts. So you have to say, okay, I am on the right path. And I talked, can I use names? I'll just be wanting to respect these people's humility, is that I was talking with another monk who said that things get really bad before they really get good. And that's helped a lot. And that seems to be really true. Even just psychologically, people fall apart. They feel like they're going to lose their mind. All hell breaks loose. They come here, and I'm not saying it's me, but they get better. They turn a corner. Why? Because they learn from it. They learn something very, very valuable they never could have learned any other way. So I think thinking positive is really important. It's not a direct way to attack the logisme, but because no one really says to interact with them. In fact, I should probably describe how it works. So there's 5 stages of these assaultive thoughts. And let's make it not so frightening. Let's make it like, I want to steal a candy bar. So the first level is, and say like the store is across the street from my office, I think about, hey, a Snickers bar would be good. I don't have any money, but it's a tiny little bar, and I don't look like a thief. I'll just take it. Now, that thought is still on the outside of me, and it's usually faster than that. I made it a little bit longer, but it's a flash. And I'm not a Greek expert, but I think logisme also has to do with like a thought image. We don't really have an easy translation in English, but it's kind of assaultive thought. So that's called the you could call it imitation, but there's a word for it. Assault. That's the first assault. The next level is dialogue. Dialogos, words with. Logos meaning words, dia meaning with. To interact with the thought, or coupling with the thought. So you don't want to do that. That's like, it could go the direction of, well, Snickers does taste good. I can taste it in my mouth. That's even interacting with it at all. Or it's, oh no, why did I think such a wicked thought? Okay, that's still interacting with the thought. The third level is consent. this is where the thought comes to our heart. So we go from a head, it's knocking on the door like an unwanted salesperson. Here I am, let me in. And it's like, no. And I'm going to watch TV, do anything else holy, that is, then interact with it. Just let them knock. That's fine. Ignore it. And we'll talk about why it's so hard to ignore them, because your question's deeper than this. The third stage is where, for those that are Christians, sin is conceived. This is where I have decided I'm consenting, I'm going to go over there and take that Snickers bar without paying for it. The fourth level is actually doing that, and that would be a sin, the actual stealing of it. And then the fifth stage is passion, where we get the roots of the word passive, which means, well, passive meaning we can do it without thinking. So if I take candy bars all the time, I'm a thief. It becomes kind of an identity, and that becomes kind of a major soul sickness for me, is stealing. So a lot of us are working our way by God's grace. You've got to have God's grace for this. You can't do this in and of yourself. And I was actually going to talk a little bit about this tonight. I don't think we can fix racism with legislation alone, or with our human efforts, technology. I mean, this would be humbling, and it sounds like chastising of all humanity, but if we're so wonderful, we have the best technology in the world, we have the best medical stuff in the world, we know how to do everything, we have more knowledge than we've ever had, then what's wrong with us? There's simple things we still have yet to be able to fix. Yeah, there's political systems that people think are good and all. We still fight like brothers and sisters. Yeah, no, this is as good as it gets. It's because we're barking up the wrong tree. In fact, to get a little bit Christianity tonight, is we're barking up the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the tree, the fruit that Adam and Eve partook of that got us on the wrong track. What we need is the tree of life. And the tree of life is Jesus Christ, and we're not going to find answers to our problems any other way. And that's where, if there is a benefit to the coronavirus, not that I wanted to see people sick, if there's a benefit, I hate to say this, but I really mean this with sincerity of heart, to have such a serious problem as racism that goes back for centuries. The benefit is it humbles us to go, we've got to look to God to solve this. We need a higher power. We need something. And that's the benefit of having an addiction. So when it comes to the logos me, if I'm humble, I don't even interact with the thought. I don't even, say like my thing is heroin, which it isn't, but it would be like someone wanting to push heroin. No, I'm not going to even let this person in the door. So how do I best do that? Ignore it. Ignore. And eventually it goes away. Let's move the 5 stages over to fear. It's a little bit trickier, but it's the same thing. An unwanted thought comes like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my mind. Or, oh my gosh, Antifa's going to come to our neighborhood. Or, if I go to the mall, something bad is going to happen. Well, there is no malls. Let's use something that's open. Oh, OCD. It's really a beautiful, that's a bad way of putting it, a beautiful disease in that it's so darn sneaky. And it tricks you into it. That's why it's like flypaper, A person that washes their hands, well, then they had one thought that suggested that they just wash their hands again, they would feel more comfort by doing that. But because the logos me kind of thought suggests that, but how do I know that I've gotten all the germs off? Well, I don't. And if I sort for error, I'm going to find error. So if I sort for how the door knobs might not be locked, then I'm going to be clicking it and doing rituals to try to prove to myself that it is locked. The problem is it's self-rewarding. I did my ritual at 3 clicks with the door to make sure that nothing bad will happen. And then maybe the OCD thoughts So it starts with a simple thought, a lie, an assaultive, and if I let it in my house, let it in my thoughts, I go, oh no, that's a terrible thought, that's interacting with it. It's really kind of as rude as ignoring a person at a party. You snub it, you ignore them, you just don't even interact with them. You just go, you don't even say hi. You don't, because you would start an argument. And arguing with the enemy, he has had years of practice. I've had 57, and even then, not all of those. So I'm better off running to God who will save me. But let's say, like, I've let the fear into my heart. Well, now, and I mean this so politely, but fear technically is a sin. Why? Because I'm not really trusting in God. And if God wanted anything from me, it's a simple trust, to believe in Him, to believe that He is, and He is the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. If one reads the Bible, there's lots and lots of verses about fear not. There's verses that suggest by being anxious, will we add any length to our life? How could we be fearful when He knows all of our hairs on our head are numbered, and He knows us better than we know ourselves? So there's this deep sense that I really don't know God, and I don't really know His love. And I know this can sound very condemning, but I mean this from a good place so that we can learn and grow. I'm speaking from my own life, actually. That I had to get to a place where, am I really trusting in God's love for me? That any harm could come to me. Now, it doesn't mean I go walk near a cliff, because that's something else. That's me testing God. But to be so relying upon myself to make sure I keep myself safe and to fix everything myself, it becomes just self, more self. There is a strange sense when we abandon ourselves for God and we just trust in Him, it all kind of works out. The fourth stage is we do a behavior, or we actually worry. We actually engage in it. We may do a ritual to try to make like stealing of the Snickers bar. Here we're actually doing something to fix it, so we think, but it makes it worse. I'm not big on medication for fears because I think it's avoiding the real issue. And I would go toe-to-toe with doctors in a respectful manner. These medications are not deficiencies in the brain. Yeah, they're just not. And it's not addressing the root cause. Let's not confuse mechanism with cause. I may get really, really angry at my brother, and if someone quickly took my blood and says, wow, you have a lot of raging hormones, we're going to fix that pharmaceutically. Oh, okay. And they confuse that as though that's the cause. No, the cause is I have a problem with anger. And you could do this with any interaction. You can do this with sexuality. Well, we have a drug for that. In fact, there are people, they needed to invent, on this little my soapbox, they needed to invent the term intermittent explosive disorder. And how were they going to fix that? With an anti-seizure medicine. It's like, this is craziness. Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of medication. So it doesn't address the problem, and then what happens is your body begins to adapt to the medication. Then you end up, say like you had 4 receptor sites for GABA, G-A-B-A, gamma aminobutyric acid. Well, then your body goes, oh, he's added like Valium or clonazepam or alprazolam. Well, then I'm just going to grow more. So now you end up with 8. So now you have more sensitivity than when you started, because the body's always seeking. And so you can thank your doctor or nurse for prescribing that to you, because no, it doesn't. It's not. I mean, I just never really seen it work long term. And I worked with people that were in their 80s that the doctor said they had to be on it the rest of their life. She had 12. Well, I don't want to identify them too much, but it's obscure. It's 20 years ago. But she had a lot of aneurysms. She successfully got off of that and now leads a much better life than she was doing. Yeah, no, people can... Now, I'm not going to shame people that take medication as a stepping stone or don't even know any better. But if people wanted long-term results, I don't know how to help them if they're physiologically doing that to themselves. Here's the other behavior that happens with fear is that now I'm fixing this logisme by taking a pill. I feel so much better. And that's kind of a strange dynamic, and I see it all the time, is that we avoid the thing we're afraid of, and I've done my share of avoiding. What it does is it makes the fear worse, because it's this pseudo-comfort. And this is how then the enemy can manipulate me to make me not say what I need to say or to do what I need to do. It just goes on and on. And then, of course, akidia, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, is the fear passion. And it can really lead to depression and despair, etc. So, that's the problem. Is there a solution? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I see solutions all the time. You just have to work on it. One, believe it or not, work on it by not working so hard. People who are prone to this kind of fear overthink. So teaching them to underthink. Too much information, teaching them that less is better. So even if people are, for instance, let's look at the people that don't watch the news. In fact, if we saw the news, the media as the logisme, and the people that are probably not so shaking in their boots, sleeping well at night, I think all of us struggle, but they may be more on the ADD side of life. I mean this politely. They're just not that effective because they don't really interact with it much. Yeah, they know that there's some bad things happening in communities. They feel bad about it, but it's minimal. And I'm not saying they're bad people. They just don't think about it much. They're too busy doing and let's assume they're not using any drugs or behaviors that are addictive, alcohol. They just don't think about it that much. So, is there some value to what they have? Yes. They have learned to ignore things, to grow brain cells that just aren't that sensitive. And let's redeem this into a more godly trait. It's like total trust in God. And I had a friend named Steve who this is a true story. Can I show this? I think I can. Steve, if you're out there, I love you, brother. It's great. So I had just had colon surgery. Had a colon resection, which was like a big surgery. 8 days in the hospital. Wasn't feeling too well. It was elective, meaning it's not an emergency, but it was more of a diverticulitis, and it was preventative from having an attack, and I was 36 at the time. So when this happened, this is a good story. The doctor came in about Wednesday. I had the surgery like 5 days early, and they said, well, we took your appendix to the lab, and we found a tumor. And now I was on some morphine, but it's like, I didn't order a tumor. I mean, that was not, and I just did not want that. I was scared. I was alone. I didn't have a lot of support in the hospital, and he said, oh, this is a good thing. Someone's watching out for you because we got it all. And it was fortuitous. He said it was not, it's a carcinoid, extremely rare, but yeah, this is a really good story to share. Thank you, God. So it was fortuitous. He said, someone's watching out for you, but he looked nervous when sharing this. So I sat there and I tried not to think about it. Well, good luck on that. I called my dear, wonderful pastor, priest. He just said, I think it's the medication you're on. You're going to be fine. And somehow it diffused it a bit and I felt better. But yeah, no, I was not feeling too well because I thought, well, if I have one, I could have another. And so fast forward a bit. I recovered, but then one time I thought, well, I should probably go online and look at that. It was under the cancer section. It's like, you told me it wasn't cancer. No, it's under the cancer thing. I remember it was like 10 o'clock at night. I shouldn't be looking at the internet at 10 o'clock at night. The blood left my head. I felt like my spine. I felt like such a visceral, like a hot flash up, like my spinal cord. And it's like, I could just tell I wasn't going to go to sleep. It just frightened me. So this went on and off. But the good news that came out of it is I learned, like, you know what? I've got to put my life in God's hands. That's how I got to live. Otherwise, I'm going to do I put my life in my own hands trying to make myself not experience something or want? I realize God's will for my life, whether I get a tumor or not, is where I'd rather be. So maybe I get persecuted or not, or maybe I randomly go to the store and someone bad hurts me. See, this is what fears do, is it's always relying upon self to save me. And this book, which I was going to use tonight, the AA book, says that fears are always about self-reliance. That they say we need to get rid of self. And it's no longer I who lives, but Christ lives in me. That I can't run my life my own way. I have to give up. And so it means letting go of control. For a while I had this kind of meditative practice where I'd let go of my hands, because I realized when I'm physically holding on to something, I'm holding on, and it's like I need to let go, let go, let go. The Logos me trick us into thinking that if I hold on, it's something I need to attend to. That it's something I need to think about. I was jokingly saying something like, my worrying will help save the world. I'll save the world through my worrying. And I thought that was funny. That's what we might do if we're codependent. We might think that my being in the know is somehow going to help anything. And in that know, if I really worry and think, oh my gosh, that's terrible, catastrophic thinking. So we're going to get to some practical things here. So enough of the philosophy of it. So first of all, if you wear a wrist bracelet, something to go, in this day, my goal is to try to, one day at a time, follow God and shoo away these gnats. And it's okay. And the problem is, anxiety makes us overfocus. So every gnat is important. No, not every gnat is important. Just no. If I really need to know something, it's like the news. I'll learn about it through God or the world or something like that. I don't need to do that. And same thing with fears. It tricks us into thinking, but you might really want to worry about that, because if you don't worry about that, then something bad will happen. It's like, no, fine, I'll lose my mind. In fact, this is meant to be a joke. Losing my mind wouldn't be that terrible. And I mean no disrespect to people that have suffered some mental disorder type challenges, but the problem is most of our problems start in the mind. And that's why you really can't find God in thinking. And that's not a path. So you want to take time to slow down, to sit in a quiet, comfy chair, wrap up in a blanket, or do something that's comfortable. But just expect to take time to quiet down, to practice. This calms your nervous system down. Let's see, the stubbornness of, so if I say let's not think of X, Y, and Z, it makes us think about it more. So sometimes there's value to go, yeah, that's nice. And this was actually a joke we used to play. It was kind of a mean joke, but we all played it when I was in a Christian singing group. Someone would have something really important, something insightful, and we go, oh, that's nice. Anyway, we went bowling, and we said it over and over, and it was really funny because it was so put down to the person, but we'd all laugh. And we knew it wasn't really putting him down. What it was is something really deep and spiritual. We thought, that's nice. And then we tried to find the lightest, shallowest thing we could do. There's a certain attitude like, oh, it's you again. Fine. And when you realize, there are saints that talk about this, Satan is there to help us with our salvation. And when we realize suffering, trials, do I like them? No. Well, I do and I don't. My priest, wonderful man, had shared about trials and suffering. That's kind of, he's there. And then immediately he had shattered his leg. It's like, he goes, well, see, we all kind of like, I talk about locust, man, it's like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't trip, over identifying. And it's like, but this is how life is. There's a certain immune system we need to be able to build up to realize this is how life is. We can get stronger. This is the problem with the coronavirus and people that are so afraid to leave their house. Bless your hearts, I'm not trying to put you down, and I'm not trying to say that we all haven't had some share of, gosh, we don't know how contagious this is. But life is full of risk. It is. No. We could get a bunch of heart disease. We could have a whole bunch of other, while we're trying to save our lives from the coronavirus, we could end up going to another extreme and lose our life some other way. That's why the scriptures tell us we should lose our life and we'll find it. He who seeks his life will lose it. Yeah. We are not to be silly and stupid, and we believe in science, but there is a sense that we jump into the arms of our loving Father and he catches us. If there is a metaphor for when Christ says we should be like little children, hopefully children don't think so much. They would jump into the arms of a parent for fun. And they don't have, most don't have a fear that they would not be catched. There's that childlike trust. I love to be bold on this. And I work with people from all different backgrounds, people that are Christian, people that aren't Christian. But a lot of people with 12 steps, or need for 12 steps in my humble opinion, and I'll ask them. I said, look, just ask yourself, are you solving this well yourself? No, because they have a needle in their arm, they're drinking, like it's really crushing them, horrible addictions. I said, do you believe that there is a God out there? Most people do, yeah. Have you thought, if he knows everything, he loves you, assuming he's a good God, why not just ask him for help? And it's so elusively simple. Just so elusively simple, like, well, it has to be more complex. I should read a book. I said, no, just ask him for help. They come back, and I can get almost teary-eyed, like, it's amazing, because God has never let anybody down. Never let anybody down, ever. There are people that go, well, you let me down because something bad happened. I know. But truly, God is good and loving. There's no way on earth he cannot not do that. And so these people come back and say, I can't believe this. They can't believe the peace they feel. Well, I can't get into the details of this story, but it's an astounding story. I will tweak it a little bit to protect the identity. And this could apply to like 5 of the people I've worked with. But this gentleman was really struggling with anxiety so bad that, like, hard to sit still, and moving like that. Had taken more than he should have of Prozac to fix things. And I'm moving changing the names of the medications, similar. I said, you don't want to take like 16 of those. So then he went to the hospital. He wanted to go to the hospital. I said, you don't want to go there because it doesn't always fix things. A lot of people want to go there as if it's going to fix it. The problem is it's a hospital. You get hospital food, you get hospital service. Not trying to put down people that work in a hospital. Most of the nurses I know, they don't want to be in the hospital because they know how it is. Do we need it? Yes, we need it when we need it. But if you can do things at home, do things at home. This guy was struggling with taking too many benzodiazepines. He was married. His wife had a life-threatening illness. They also had issues with a family member who had threatened to harm them. Also had issues with the government wanting to audit. And so here the person's trying to deal with his life with all these things. It's like I started to kind of feel like, how do you do this? So I say pray. And what happened, and this is so similar to so many people, somehow in the midst of their journey they started to pray, and it's like they visibly just looked different. They calmed down. It was just shocking. I mean, I believe in God, but it was kind of like shocking, the peace. They go, well, things aren't all better, but something's happening. Like, I feel better. So I think the point of this is that you can't really, how do I put it? You can't fix a spiritual problem. Well, psychology helps, I think, a little bit. There are cases where people need a little bit of the tools of psychology to help get to the spiritual thing, like safety. If you don't feel safe with the person you're talking with, have good rapport, understand things about brain science and stuff, it just makes it hard to talk about these things to get them out. If we grew up in an abusive childhood where our parents were really challenging to us, and we have no idea that that's how we're bent, we're going to think God's out to get me, like a getcha God. Like, I'm such a screw up. So those are the things that can be fixed by psychology. But I really believe a couple of things. Addictions are really spiritual. Fears, really spiritual. I mean, there's a physiological component, but it's like these thoughts emanate outside us, and that's kind of the thing we need to be aware of. So letting go of control. And I guess the last story, what I said is, you don't have to understand it for it to work. And people that struggle with anxiety often are too strong. They overcope. They have everything planned out. They want to know everything. And it's like, yeah, just do a few things. Boy, did I get off track. God help me. So back to my, you're going to love me. Okay, back to my story with Steve. This might be a good, pleasant ending. So I had my colon surgery. I'm probably 3 months into this. It was spring, and I see him in my little town, and I had a history with him. Wonderful guy. How are you doing, Eric? I said, well, I actually had colon surgery. Now, I'd known Steve like at least 5 years. Guess what? He said, I've had 21 surgeries on my colon, and I'm wearing a bag. It made my problems not feel like anything. Like, whoa, what do I have to complain about? He looks great. Fast forward a little bit, I'm always going through some kind of challenge, and there's a lot of Steves in the world that may be in 12-step recovery, but I'm just sensitive to making sure it's okay. But anyway, he says, well, just second step this. Now, I know what the second step is in the 12 steps. It says, came to believe that a power greater than herself will restore us to sanity. And after admitting powerless over whatever our problem is, maybe it's world violence, maybe it's discrimination, racism, maybe it's COVID-19, maybe it's fears of, are people going to listen to me, or are they just going to think I'm judging them when I share just from my heart? Everything seems to be like a powder keg, and we are powerless. In fact, we're probably more powerless than we all admit. Steps 1 tells us what the problem is. Steps 2 is the solution. There is a power, a loving God who is greater than myself. That's why who will restore me to sanity, will restore those around me to sanity if they want. So I said, okay, Steve, I know how this works. He says, well, just second step it. And I said, okay. And Steve is probably one of the most loving, hugging person. He says, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I said, well, what do you mean by second step? And he says, look, it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. As God has planned this universe, it's all going to work out. I want to participate in his plan. I want to participate in his power. I want to participate in his plan of salvation. But without me, and I think God wants me, and he wants all of us. He doesn't want anybody to not be included. He's going to carry out his holy will anyway. And so I have really nothing to fear. By the way, he says, no, God loves me, he's greater than me, and it'll all work out in the end. And that's what we have to say to ourselves over and over and over. We may say it as a prayer. The logismi are there to say the exact opposite. It's not going to turn out. Run for your life. It's horrible. Now, I wish I could raise my hand and testify that I never buy into that. No, that's not how it works, at least for me. Maybe there's holier people out there they are. But no, the cursor in the screen that says Eric's will, God's will, I can never just move this over here to God's will and say yes to all in the future. No, every day I have to move my will to God's will. And that's what I do. When you do that, and I can be bold about this and testify to this, is that when I apply this step, it all works out. And I go from shaking in my boots to feeling peace within usually minutes. And I sometimes go to tears. I'm so thankful that I can do that I can go to God and he hears me and he loves me. And it's not always emotional. I'm getting emotional now, but I think it's been an emotional week. Couple of good books. The Providence of God by St. John Chrysostom. He talks all about the providence of God and that's the roots. Us not connecting with his providence, that things are laid out. It's not that God's controlling, but he's in control. And another good book is The Sunflower by St. John of Tobolsk. The original St. John Maximovich, very confusing, but it was an uncle, a distant uncle. So I thought, well, how can this St. John Maximovich be, who died in Seattle, I think in the 60s? This book was in the 1800s. Very foundational book. In fact, I'm so thankful I read these books before this because it's given me peace. So, peace be unto you guys. You take care and have a good week.